Today I am going to begin a series of teachings on the Kagyu lineage. And I'm going to be basing much of the teaching today on the life of Tilopa. And the book that I'm using is this one, Tilopa, A Glimpse of His Life by the 12th Kenton Tai Situpa, and with some help from Ken Holmes. So to start with, the Kagyu lineage, they call themselves the long version of Kagyu is the practice lineage of the realization lineage. When you practice, you attain realization. So we're also referred to as the practice lineage. And the lineage masters that I'm going to be talking about are the ones that are in the Mamudra Lineage supplication. And the supplication begins with Vajradhara and then Tilopa. So today I'm going to talk about the life of Tilopa and why Vajradhara then is in the lineage just before Tilopa. So Tibetan Buddhism specializes in Vajrayana. We have all three vehicles, the foundation vehicle, the Mahayana, but Tibetan Buddhism specializes in Vajrayana. The deity practices mantra repetition, and especially the Mamudra teachings for the Kagyu lineage. And so going back again to the meaning of the Kagyu lineage, it refers to the transmission of knowledge, skill, insight, and the teaching ability from the teacher to transmit it to the student. In the book class on Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism by Chogyam Trungpa, he talked a lot about the student opening up to the teacher. And so that is what is being talked about here, is the students opening up to the teacher, and then the teacher transmitting his knowledge or her knowledge to the student, and then the student developing as deep a realization as the teacher in many instances. So the highest teachings of the Kagyu are the Mamudra. And this is about the recognition of the ultimate nature of mind, of our ultimate essence. And other areas that they specialize in is Tumo, which is sometimes referred to as heat, and then dream and bardo yoga, and then union practices. Now, the enigmas have their highest teachings are called the Great Perfection. And the Gelupas, their highest teachings are called the Great Middle Way. So this quote here is from the aspiration prayer of Mamudra by the third Karmapa. We repeat this when we do Nyungne in the third session. And Mamudra means a great seal or imprint that actually, this is more introduction to this prayer, that all phenomena are inevitably stamped by the fact of wisdom and emptiness are inseparable. And this is beyond conceptual knowledge. So the quote from the prayer is, free from intellectual speculation, it is Mahamudra. Free from extremes, it is the great middle way. Being the totality of everything, it is also called the great perfection. May I gain conviction that to know this thing is to understand all. So these three different teachings from three different lineages, well, the techniques may vary slightly. It's all going to the same place. And when Rinpoche taught Mahamudra in 3-year retreat, he would sometimes say, now this following teaching comes from Dzogchen, or the Great Perfection Teachings. So it is not that you study one and ignore the others, but on the other hand, you do need a master, a guru, to guide you rather than just doing it all on your own. It just doesn't work if you do not have a guru to follow. So the Mamudra lineage, the first human is Tilopa. And I looked up some dates here, and these are approximate, but this will give you an idea. Tilopa lived from 988 to 1069 of this era. Naropa, 1016 to 1100. Marpa from 1012 to 1097. Milarepa, I got two different dates. I'm going to split the difference and say 1035 to 11, about 1120. And then Gampopa, 1079 to 1153. And his main student, in terms of the Mamudra lineage, is the first Karmapa, Dusam Khenpa, and he lived from 1110 to 1193. And in the Mamudra lineage supplication, it talks about the earlier and the later lineages. That's the term that Karmapa likes to use. It used to be translated the lesser and the greater, but he says that's really a misinterpretation. And it was, what was really meant is that some were formed earlier than others. Now, the reason why this starts with Dorje Chang or Vajradhara is this is a quote of Tilopa's. I, Tilopa, have no human guru. My guru is mighty Vajradhara. So now I'm going to go briefly through his life, and this will help explain why he said this. And again, I am just skimming over the contents of this book. It's a very rich book full of excellent teachings on Mahamudra. So he was born into a Brahmin caste. And right from the start, there is this old bent over woman that keeps appearing, a Dakini, appearing in the form of an old bent over woman. And so she appears to Tilopa's mother when he was an infant and casts the shadow, and the mother gets very protective worried that this is an evil spirit that's casting this shadow. And instead, she tells his mother not to be afraid, but that she should let Tilopa tend the buffalo and grow in literacy. And the family had a herd of water buffalo. So the mother followed these instructions and let him do that, but they also gave him instructions on how to read and so forth. And then later, the same old appearing Dakini appears to Tilopa and says, now you have to study Dharma. It's time for you to do this. So he did study Dharma. He enjoyed studying the Dharma. He learned quite a lot. And so much so that he decided to become a monk and went to live in a monastery. And he was a very good disciplined monk. Much of monastic discipline is exterior discipline or external discipline. Maybe that's a better word for it. But he was very good at being a monk and studying and learning and practicing. Now, one day he was in the shrine room and he noticed this unusual light or glow coming from the base of the throne that the Buddha statue was on. And so we went over to look at it, and he found a concealed treasure, a text that was on the Tantra of Tara. And he could read it, but he really couldn't understand it. So he prayed for the old Dakini's help. And she told him that you have to go to a charnel ground, and there you will find a guru that can explain this. So he went to this specific charnel ground that she told him to go to, and he found the Mahasiddhi or Siddha Sharapa. And Sharapa was able to reveal the meaning of this text to Tilopa. And he gave him instructions on many other texts and gave him key instructions. So while he was there at this charnel ground, he met and studied under another Mahasiddha, Matangi. Now, he is still a monk at this point, and he is still associated with the monastery. And he is still keeping monastic discipline. Now, this old Dakini visits him another time and explains the Chakrasamvara Tantra to him. And Chakrasamvara is one of the main tantras of the Kagyu lineage. In a 3-year retreat, that is one of the main practices that you do, is Chakrasamvara. So Taisitu says, soon he understood the one essential character of Prajnaparamita and Chakrasamvara, that these are male and female deities in union, and that the truth is beyond conceptuality. I believe the Dakini said, quote, "Water may wash away the stains, but never the water itself." So here, concepts and thoughts are compared to water. They can help purify, but they can't remove themselves. So this Dakini continues to appear and teach him, give him directions, and so forth. And now she tells him, and interestingly enough, of course, Tilopa follows her instructions. It isn't like, okay, well, this sounds like a good idea. And well, that doesn't sound so good. He just follows the instructions. So she tells him now that it's time to go beyond these limited concepts of good and bad. And in order to do this, that you have to take on samaya commitments, which are based on inner self-liberation, not external things. Now, Taisitu says that these samaya commitments actually do contain the pratimoksha vows and the bodhisattva vows, as well as Vajrayana vows. But with the samaya, it's a very different type of commitment. And she tells him that he needs to devote his practice to Mamudra, and she promises to help him attain realization. Then she gave him some bizarre instructions, which was to go to the roof of the monastery, act crazy, take this Tara text and throw it off the river, off the roof into the river. And she said, "Don't worry, I'll get it. It won't be harmed." And so he follows the instructions, gets up on top of the monastery roof, starts acting like a madman, ranting and raving, and throws the text. And then they decide to relieve him of his duties, his monastic duties, which is what the point was, because now he has more time to practice. But then going on from there, he gets involved in unconventional behavior. And to all appearances of these monks that are following these pratimoksha vows, he's violating his vows, and they kick him out of the monastery because he's a bad monk, at least on the surface. Well, now the Dakini appears and says, now go to Vanga, V-A-N-G-A. Maybe it's Va. Anyway, that's how it's spelled. It's in the east. There's a market there called Penasalan, and work for a woman named Barima and her associates. And this will bring all your practice to an ultimate end, and you will achieve siddhi. So, meaning achieving siddhi, a very high level of realization. So he goes looking, finds her and her associates, and they turn out to be prostitutes. So he works for her in the evening. And then by day, he grinds sesame seeds so that they can be pressed into oil. Now, this seems like a pretty bizarre situation. He's not in his monk robes anymore. And so by day, he's grinding sesame seeds, and then in the evening, he's assisting prostitutes, bringing in the customers and so forth. This is where he gets his name, by the way, was because of the sesame seeds. That the sesame seed is called Tila, T-I-L-A. And Tila Pida means pounder of sesame seeds. So it became Tilopa. Well, while he was pounding the sesame seeds, he maintained his awareness and meditative concentration. So actually, as he was outwardly pounding sesame seeds, inwardly, he was in a very high level of meditation and meditative concentration. And as a result, his mental clarity increased and his realization increased. Now, Taisito Rinpoche says that actually Barima, the prostitute, was a highly evolved Dakini, that she was an emanation of a bodhisattva, and that she emanated there to help the local people develop spiritually. Tilopas stayed there for 4 to 6 years. And then, quote, one day as predicted, his accomplishments came to its perfection. One and all then saw him in space in the heart of a tent of rainbow light at a height of about 7 coconut trees above ground level. That's a quote of Taisito Rinpoche's from the book. So people seeing this then prostrated to him and had tremendous respect for him. And he gave teachings about the nature of mind, about Buddha nature. This biography is full of Taisito Rinpoche uses the word couplets, verses, maybe dohas, with these teachings. So after that, then the old Dakini appears and tells him to go to Urjan, which Taisito Rinpoche was probably in Afghanistan, north of India, and that he would receive teachings from the, quote, faultless Dakini, end quote. Now, by this time, he had already realized the teachings. He didn't need them, but he went there to receive them freshly so that he would be better able to pass them on to his students in the future. So he arrives at a realm that is described as inaccessible to ordinary humans. And there is a mandala there of dakinis, with this faultless dakini being in the center of the mandala, and then a circle of dakinis that have some realization, and then some worldly dakinis outside of them. And so as he approaches the mandala, these worldly dakinis started causing all kinds of appearances, frightening appearances. You might say to test Tilopa, to see if he was ready to go beyond this round of dakinis. So Taisita Rinpoche said it's a bit like these protectors by appearing or causing these frightening appearances can help remove the confusion and neurosis of disciples. But Naropa was totally unmoved by any of this. And he quickly subdued them. These were worldly dakinis, not enlightened, but they still had a lot of power. So these dakinis, worldly dakinis that he subdued, sang together this song: like moths drawn to a brilliant flame, in trying to tame you, we ourselves are subdued. Now do with us what you will. And they were bound to him. So now he approaches the inner mandala, and here is this host of realized dakinis. And they too test him by causing all kinds of fearful appearances. Rivers of fire, clouds of poisonous gas, unexpected precipices, and so forth. And Tilopa is totally calm, totally unperturbed by all of this. And so he said a few couplets, but the one that I'm going to quote here is, for oil lamps to challenge the brilliant sunlight is simply tiring. And so he looked at the enlightened dakinis with the same look that he gave the worldly dakinis. Quote, looks at them with his special Vajra gaze of wisdom, fire, and instantly subdues them. So now they too bind themselves by oath to Tilopa's service. And he meets the main wisdom dakini. And she gives him a challenge in verse form. And to kind of sum up, Tilopa's answer is, he says that free of duality, there is nothing to be listened to, looked at, or said. So she then gives him teachings, the teachings that he came for. Now, there's much more in the book, but there just isn't time to go through all of this. So then, after receiving these teachings from her, and these are Mamudra teachings, that he leaves and travels to the formless dakini. And he received teachings on 9 separate topics. And again, in the book, these are gone through in great detail, and they're quite interesting. But to move right along, so to speak here, after that, then Tilopa receives teachings directly from Vajradhara. Tilopa hasn't gone anywhere. These teachings come from the Dharma Dhatu, the sphere of phenomena, And since the Dharmadhatu is everywhere, it can never be somewhere else or not here. The Dharmadhatu is everywhere, so he didn't have to go anywhere. And Vajradhara is a facet of awakened mind, not a separate deity. And like the Dharmadhatu, Vajradhara can't go anywhere because Vajradhara is everywhere. And Vajradhara can be experienced as any of the three kayas, the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Nirmanakaya. In our paintings of Vajradhara, he's usually in the Sambhogakaya form with the Sambhogakaya ornaments and so forth. So he receives from Vajradhara 5 personal transmissions, and they are the outer, the inner, the secret, the most secret, and suchness. These first 3, outer, inner, and secret, Taisitra Rinpoche explains as they're being somewhat describable. But the last 2 are totally beyond description. And they are all, you might say, personal transmissions that Tilopa receives from Vajradhara. And this sounds kind of dualistic. You might say he just realized all of this, that it was always there. So in terms of personal transmissions, frequently the Kagyus talk about the whispered or oral transmissions, and meaning that they are not written down. And quote, in this case, it is the direct inspiration of enlightenment unveiling the 5 aspects to Tilopa. So I think this unveiling is an important word. It's just removing what was hiding them. At this point, Tilopa becomes a complete and perfect Buddha and is manifesting the aspect of Vajradhara. Now, Vajra means unchanging, and it also means diamond. And so this is pointing at the inalterable, ever pure condition of natural mind. Taisitra Rinpoche then compares this like the meeting of the mother and child in the bardo of dying, that through practice, you come to recognize the child luminosity. And then when the mother luminosity appears, although it is much greater than the child luminosity, they are similar enough that if you recognize a child luminosity, you recognize the mother luminosity. And so this is kind of what happened. It was through his practice and his attainment that he had recognized the child luminosity, and that allowed him to recognize the mother luminosity. At this point, subject and object have been totally eliminated. and replaced by this enlightened state of Vajradhara. And this is where all Vajrayana practice leads. This is an important point to remember, that this is where Vajrayana practice leads. But we need a teacher to guide us, to tell us when we are, you might say, missing the point or misconstruing things, or where we need to spend more time in our study or our practice, and so forth. That our teachers, our lamas, keep us on the unmistaken path. They teach us, they give us transmissions and all kinds of other benefits. Now, to go back to that quote in the beginning where Tilopa said he had no human teachers, what he meant was that he wanted his students to understand the power and freshness of his direct realization. He wasn't feeling ingratitude or it was unnecessary for him to study in the monastery, to receive teachings from Mahasiddhas and Dakinis and everything else that assisted him on his path, but that ultimately his realization was fresh, direct, and pure. With that, I would like to open it up to question and answers. The question is, why did the Dakini appear as a prostitute? And in another version of Tilopa's life, the woman was a prostitute and not a Dakini. And when she saw Tilopa up in the sky, 7 coconut trees in height, surrounded by this tent, she repented and became his student. But this is what Taisita Rinpoche says in his book, and he doesn't say why, but I am going to surmise this, that she had gone beyond the duality of good and bad, and felt that this was a way that she could benefit the people of the area the most. In this biography, it says that the area received tremendous benefit from Tilopa and her being there. And that the people, when they saw Tilopa in the air, they all became very devoted, and many of them attained high spiritual levels. Well, the question was that there are lots of other deities like Mahakala and so forth that have a crown of skulls. And it can have different meanings. The wrathful deities usually have crowns of skull because they're ferocious, they're supposed to be frightening, and so forth. Yogis that meditate in charnel grounds, again, will have these wrathful bone ornaments. And so there is that connection. These are wrathful ornaments, and they remind one of impermanence. And again, a charnel ground is a scary place that at night, the animals come to feed off the corpses. There are all kinds of, shall we say, noises, snarlings, fights, and so forth. And so it does have this wrathful aspect, and it does have that connection.